Hello YouTube, my name is Sebastian and welcome. Today I am starting my very first tutorial series here on my YouTube channel, and today we're going to learn some GameMaker Studio 2 or 1. You can do exactly the same in 1, and we're going to do we're going to make a game. It's going to be a top-down shooter game. So if you're new to GameMaker, you don't really know how everything works, but you have maybe some knowledge but don't know how to put all the pieces together. That's why I'm here. So I'm going to try my best to teach you the mindset. That's actually what I'm going to try and do, because that's what I had a great deal of problems with when I came into coding and game making in particular, because I could watch a lot of tutorials and know how to do a lot of different stuff, but I would never quite know how to twist it to whatever I wanted to make and combine them and stuff like that. So that's what I'm kind of hoping to teach you guys, which is why I won't be preparing for all of the videos, because I want to go through with you and like figure it out as it comes. So I don't want to have like a prepared script that you just need to copy or something. We're going to come up with it, and I'm going to try and talk you through everything. But today we're just going to do the very basics. This is something that I've done a lot of times, so I won't have to come up with anything, but we'll take it all the way anyways, and I'll try and explain my best. I expect that you know a little bit about code, but I'll explain briefly whatever I'm doing. So yeah, let's go ahead. So first of all, over here on the right we have all of resources for our project. If you're using GameMaker Studio 1, which you absolutely can, they'll be located on the left here. There's some minor differences in functions and stuff between the two platforms, but yeah, let's get going. So in GameMaker Studio 2 we have the room here. This is where the game is going to be taking place, so it's going to be like the levels. So room 1 might be level 1, or room 2 might be room level 2, and so forth and so on. And you can also use them for making menus. So if you want like a title screen, that will be a room, and maybe you want some cutscenes, that can be a room, whatever. So that's the purpose of rooms. That is the game, sections of the game. Then I'm only going to go through some of these. So we have the sprites and the objects. Those are the other two, and maybe scripts that we'll be using today. Now let's just use sprites and objects. So the sprites right here, that's the images that you see in game. That's the assets, all of the assets that you see. So your character sprite, the image of whatever character you have, that'll be a sprite. The objects, that'll be controlling the player. So a player object will control how the player works. If you press, you can code it. So if you press right, that you'll move right, and so forth and so on. So that's the basics of this. So let's get into it. Let's create a new sprite. I'm going to name it SPR for sprite, and then I'm going to do capitalize P and do player like this, sprite player. So this right here is our sprite window or editor or whatever. This is the sprite window, not the editor, but we have a lot of info right here. So this is where you can define the size of the sprite. Right here's the name. We can edit the input, edit the image, or import a new one. Up here's all the frames in the animation, if there is an animation. Right, these are just some tiling stuff and some group stuff. I've never used this group thing. We have a collision mask, which is we'll get into that later. That's basically for calculating different collisions and stuff. Then we have the origin of the sprite, which is like the rotation point of the sprite, or whenever you want to access the sprite's coordinate, that's where the origin is, which you can just move around freely if you want to, but I'm going to let it stay for now at 0, 0. So let's go ahead. First of all, I'm mainly use 16 by 16 pixels of sprite, or sized sprites. So let's go ahead over here to the size right here and just resize it. We're going to resize the canvas, and we're going to do a 16 by 16 canvas, and it's going to be in pixels, and we're going to hit apply. So you can see it got a lot smaller here. Let's just zoom in. You can do that by holding control and scrolling. If you don't hold control, you just go up and down. So now I have this. We're going to set the center here, or the origin, to the middle center, so it'll get right into the middle, 8 times 8. We're going to edit the image to open up the sprite editor. We're going to be going into this a lot because I'm not really using this sprite editor. I use a sprite for all of my coding stuff. So in here, this is just going to be a placeholder for our players. I'm going to choose this green color because that's pretty nice. I'm just going to make a circle right here. Actually, let's do this kind of circle instead. That's a bit nicer. Circle, and then we're just going to have let's just make this. We're going to make a top-down shooter, so this will be like the gun reference. So this will be the way that our gun is facing. That has to face to the right because that's like that's the basic like position of the rotation. So if your gun is pointing to the right, it'll point towards the mouse when we do the code for it. So that's just a sprite, nothing else to do there. So let's create an object for a player, and let's call it O for object, and then player with capitalized P. And this is our player object. So in here, first of all, there's some different stuff here that we'll go through, some of it. This is the sprite for the object. We're going to choose, you can either click here and select the sprite, or you can just drag the sprite over here and it'll select it itself. You can then make a new sprite for it by clicking here. You can edit the sprite, or you can edit the image or whatever. The collision mask, we won't be going into that right now. Visible, whether or not you can see it. Persistent, you're gonna have to check that, because persistent, what it means is if you go between two rooms, all the objects that were in the previous room will be deleted and the new ones from the new room will be created, unless they are persistent. So if an object is persistent, it won't be deleted when you switch to another room. So all the stuff like HP and scores or whatever that you have in an object, that'll be remembered to the next room. So check that one. These we're going to right now. Physics, we're not going to use that. Parent, I'm going to use that later in another video probably. So this right here, this is our event tab, and what that is, this is like in GameMaker we have a lot of different events that can trigger code. So you can see if you click add event here, there's a lot of different events that you can see here, very many, and they're all triggering code based on some few conditions or more conditions. So the ones that you'll be using the most all the time, that's the create event, the step event, and probably also the alarm event will be used quite sometimes. Sometimes the draw event will be used too, and I also use user events and some others, but the main events that you can use a lot of the time are the create, step, and alarm. So let's go ahead and make a create event right here. So we're gonna open it. This opens up our code editor, and we're gonna type in a description here. So this is gonna be initialize the player's variables, like that. So we're gonna initialize the player's variables. So a variable is basically a way to store data. So let's come with an example. So let's say we have a player. We want him to move with a speed. He has to move. So whenever we want to calculate the direction he's moving, we want to know how much to move him each frame. So let's write SPD for speed, because if you write speed like this, you're going to use one of GameMaker's built-in functions, which can work if you want to do that, but I like to have more control over my stuff, so I'll just be using SPD like this, and I would recommend that you use that too. It's not harder to use or anything, it just gives you more control later on. So let's see, this is a variable speed, so then we can set it equal to something. Let's say we want him to move 3 pixels at a time. So this variable speed is basically just that has the value of 3. So every time you write speed, it's the same as writing 3 basically. But the smart thing is you don't have to, if you have a lot of places where you're using the speed to calculate something, instead of writing 3 in all those spaces, you can just write the speed, and then whenever you want to update the speed, you just update it in here, and it'll be updated for every line of code that you have where you reference this variable. So that's really neat. That's how variables work. We are going to be going into some little bit harder terms this time, are we all? But we'll look at it. So we have the speed. It's 3. Now we need to do some other. We need to have some other variables that control the movement, and those are the input variables. So we need to check whether or not the player is pressing keys. So right here, actually, I'm actually going to do 2 slashes and then do 3 lines. I don't know what those are called, but that's just how I mark my headings, so I know that's how I comment out my code. But right here we have the inputs. So we want to make some variables for the inputs, and that's we're going to have a right and a left, up and down. So a right will be keyboard. It'll be a function we'll use here, keyboard check, and then we want to check for key. So you can use the built-in constants for the keys, like V key left or right would make more sense here. So this stands for virtual key right, which is your the right arrow on your keyboard. But we don't want to use that for this game because we need to use our right hand with the mouse. So we want to use WASD. And in order to do those, you can put in a code, the specific number code. I don't know what that is. So instead we're going to use a function that will return it, which is ORD. And then we can just, in here, if you put these quotation marks here, and just write whatever letter that you want to check for inside of that. So D for this example, for the right key. So right now, right here, that will be checking if we're pressing the D button right now. So the way this works, this function right here, it checks whether or not this key is being pressed, and if it is being pressed, it'll return true, which is a 1, so a value of 1, and if it's not, it'll return 0. So that basically means right here can be 1 or 0 at any given time. And basically we just want to copy this 4 times like that, and then we want to have left and up, and we want a down too. So the left will be A, the up will be W, and the down will be S, like that. So these are the basic stuffs for the movement. Then we also want to have let's just do right here, we want to have movement, or no, let's call this player control, and then we'll have a subline called movement here, and we'll have one called, let's call it shooting direction, because we want to calculate, we want to rotate the sprite so that it looks at the mouse. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to have a variable that will be an angle. We'll do that later, but right now we're just going to have face. We're going to call it facing, and we'll set it equal to 0. So this is all we have to do in the create event. Pretty easy. Now we need, this won't really do anything. The create event will only be run one time when the object is created. So this will only run for 1 frame. So actually, if you put this guy into your game and you try and press either one of these keys, nothing will happen because it's only going to check for this 1 time. So what we want to do is we want to add a step event, and then we'll just delete this. I don't want a description for this. I don't care about that. So in here, now we want to move. So first of all, we actually need to copy all of this because we need to update them every step. We want to check each step if these are being pressed. And what we want to do then, we want to have something nice here. So now we want to make it move. So we're going to use an if statement. And basically what an if statement is, it just checks for a certain condition, and if that condition is true, then it'll run the code that's inside it. So the way you do an if statement is you write if, do parentheses, inside these parentheses will be the statement that it's going to check for. Then you do curly brackets like this. You can also put them, there just has to be 2 curly brackets, one like that, an open one and a closing one be after the if statement. Some people like to put them like this. I personally just like to put them like this because it gives me more, like, it makes the code more readable. So right here, if we're pressing right, so as I said before, this function can return true or false, which means right can, the variable right can be true or false. So if right is true, that's what this checks for. So if it's equal to true, like this, you can choose to write it whatever way. If you just write right like this, it'll check if it's true. You can check like this with 2 equal signs if it's true like this. That'll also work. That'll do exactly the same. You can also check if it's false, and then if you aren't pressing right, and then it'll run the code. But right now we just want to check if it's true, and I'm going to keep it easy to read by having it like this. So if we're pressing the right button, we want to have changed our x coordinate. So you're going to do that by just writing x, and then we'll write x, and then we want to add the speed to our x coordinate. So a way you could write it would be like this. So x equal x plus speed, like that. But that is not the easiest way to write it. You can do it like this, but you can also just write plus equals and then speed. That'll do exactly the same. When you write plus equals like this, it'll take its current value and then add whatever you have here onto that variable, or value, sorry. So now we have that going. So now we want an if statement, and we're going to call it left. We're going to check for left. We're not going to call it left. We're going to check if left is true, not if left is left, but left is true. Then we're going to have x minus equals speed. Very easy. Now we're going to have an if up, then we equals true. Then we want to use our y coordinate, and then we're going to minus equals that with speed. And we're going to do this because in GameMaker the coordinate system is reversed in the y direction from what you're used to. So if you want to go upwards, you're going to have to subtract from the y coordinate, and if you want to go down, you have to add to the y coordinates. That's just something to keep in mind. So if down equals true, then we're going to have y plus equals speed, like that. So now we have the movement. This is all of our movement. Let's just do like this. Then we're gonna have here. We're gonna have gonna use change sprite rotation, or actually let's just do rotate sprite. That's all we're gonna do here. We're gonna rotate the sprite. So we want the sprite to be looking at the mouse. We want this gun to be pointing towards the mouse. And the way we're going to do that is very simple. We're just going to have, right here, we're going to have the variable direction that we had before. We're going to set that equal to point direction, which is a variable that can get the an angle between 2 points. So we're going to have between our x location and our x and y location to the mouse x location and the mouse y location, like that. So now it'll find the angle between our position, the player position, and the mouse position. And then we just want to set image angle equal to direction, like that. That's all there is to it. So that's basically all the movement and the rotation of the sprite for this video. We're going to test it just in a second. And if you didn't get the if statements, they are really simple. You can think of them this way, actually. A way to do it is, if you imagine that you are going, let's look at this code. Let me start over. This code, imagine that's like a long corridor, and then every if statement is like a door that is on the side of this corridor, and it has some text on it. So let's say you're walking down this corridor and you have a door where it says if you're thirsty then go in here. That's basically what the if statement does. So if you are thirsty, you'll go in that door. If you aren't, you'll ignore the door and you'll just keep going. That's what the if statement is doing here. So it'll be checking here. First of all, it'll be checking. Are we pressing any of these buttons? Let's say we're pressing right. Then it'll go down here. If right is true, it'll go up in here and check. Was it true? Yes, it is. Let's move to the right. Then it'll go, is left true? No. Let's do nothing. Is up true? No. We do nothing. So forth and so on. So that's how it works. So now, for making this game work, we're going to open up the room 0 here. And we're just going to change the background color real quick, because that's an ugly dark color. We're just going to choose grey, because that's a neutral color. We're going to drag in our player object on the instance layer right here. Then we're going to play the game. And we're going to see all the code compiling here. And then we have it. I don't know if you can see it. He's very small. But there he is. You can move around. And I don't know if you can see it, but he's rotating and looking towards the mouse every frame. We're going to update it. And actually, one thing I want to do quickly before we end this video, you're going to go into options, go into main, and then right here, games frames per second, you want to change that to 60 because we like 60 frames per second. And then everything will be double as fast, so you'll move double as fast now. So if you want to do that, you have to change the speeds to whatever they are, or half the speed they were at before. So the frames per second is just how many times the code will be run each second. So right now we're running this double the times we did before. But that's all we have for this time, so remember to save it. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Next time we're gonna improve this movement, because this is very basic movement. This was just to get something going. Next time I want to really do some really good movement that is really smooth and feels a lot better than this. So I really hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you next time. Remember to subscribe so you'll get the notification or whatever whenever the next video comes out. I really enjoyed this. Hope you did too. See you later.